Katie, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you on and have this conversation with you today. But before we jump into it, I did want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the listeners and share a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Katie Bramlett. I'm one of the co-founders of a fitness app called WeShape. At WeShape, we are essentially trying to create a new way in the fitness space that's focused on movement
Mhm.
rather than weight loss and calorie burning and mentality. So shifting our beliefs about why we're showing up to take care of ourselves and seeing some of the foundational, like problematic parts of toxic diet and toxic exercise culture. So, really just getting people to connect with themselves in a new way as it relates to their mind and their body.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And just help us understand a little bit around what motivated you to obviously you've co-founded this app, but what motivated you to play a role in putting this together? And yeah, and then I also want to understand why it's different than the other diets. I know you talked about movement, but I do want to get into that a little bit further as well.
Yeah. Ultimately, what really created this shift was my co founder and I were running a very different company, the opposite type of company a few years back. It was a body transformation company where
Mhm.
people would come to us for diet and exercise advice with the intention of losing weight and transforming them. And we helped thousands of people do that. The company was doing very well. We had made the Inc. 500 3 years in a row. We were scaling our company, scaling the team. And I started noticing this theme of people getting what they thought they wanted, which was weight loss and body transformation, but actually not really getting the emotional liberation and freedom that they thought that they actually would get through that.
Mm.
And I started realizing, oh, the weight loss is a path that people are taking because they think once they do that, they will love and accept themselves. And ultimately, I rarely saw.
Mm.
And so I thought, oh, I'm really trying to get people, the body transformation isn't the right. Simultaneously, I was going through my own journey of really being restricted with food I ate. There, I would even say I had some disordered eating around. I felt like I could only eat certain things. I felt like I would be jeopardizing my health and my longevity if I ate something like a cookie. It was like so restrictive.
Mhm.
So, like, I was in parallel experiencing the emotional and psychological impact of what being enmeshed in a toxic diet culture looked like.
Mhm.
So, it was like both things were happening. And
Right.
I just, I always tell people my Instagram life looked really good,
Mhm.
but there was something that was calling me in my soul. And I just was like, we got to move in a different direction. And so my
Mhm.
co-founder, so I was really focused on this. Oh my gosh, people are suffering like psychologically from this. My co-founder at the same time was going through his own process of we don't have a good standard in the fitness space around what is quality exercise. Everyone thinks quality exercise is just ballistic movements, calorie burning, no pain, no gain. And the reality is like the human body needs something very different. It needs programming that's rooted in biomechanics and science and micro movement progressions. It's like sustainable for the long haul. And we have no standard. You could go to a personal trainer. I could go to a personal trainer and we would have vastly different experiences because we don't have a standard in that space. It's like yours could have a weekend course. Mine could be working on their doctorate degree in physical therapy, right?
Yeah.
Very different, right? So the means by which we were sort of validating what quote unquote good was, there's just no standard because it's not sexy to sell movement.
Mm.
If I'm
Yeah.
telling people like you'll lose weight and burn calories and do this, and you'll have a six pack, they're more likely to buy it.
Right.
And if I tell them, let's move your body and feel good in your body so that your 85-year-old self has the least pain possible, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't
Mhm.
start when you're 85, it starts right now.
Yeah.
And so it just wasn't sexy. So it was funny because for a while we actually knew we wanted to shift out of that regardless of the success we were having. But it was like, I was trying to focus more on the mentality and he was trying to focus more on the movement. And we were at odds a little bit with how we were going to go.
Mhm.
And then finally we were like, actually, let's just put those together.
Right.
That will be the whole picture. That's how we ended up where we were. I wasn't wanting to participate in that anymore.
No, and that's awesome. Thank you for building on that. And when you talk about the toxic diet culture, that's interesting, right? Because we are in this interesting time where we have access to so much information, and social media is a key player in that. And it has its positives, but then it's also easy for people to fall into a comparison mindset, which is something I talk about quite a bit because that affects people's mental health. But then we think that, hey, outside of, I'll come back to a certain physique or body type, where we do that with other things too, other materialistic things that, hey, if I had these things too, I'd be happy and I'd look as happy as them, which is somewhat of a delusion at times because you're not really getting the real picture, right? It's very, someone told me it's curated perfection, which I can agree with. But with the toxic diet culture, it's the same idea, right? Like I want to achieve, you were talking about the six pack. And if I have this physique or if I look this way, I'm going to feel whole and complete. And what you're sharing is what you were seeing in the previous startup or business was people would achieve that, but they would feel empty because there wasn't a lot of meaning or purpose behind what they were doing. And I find that's how we connect the dots, right? It's the same in career. If you're not doing something that you find fulfilling or that has meaning, then you're bound to lose interest and not even feel that sense of contentment, which sounds like what you were seeking too from your business. And you've been able to find that now. But what are your thoughts around that? Why do you think it's obvious to a certain extent, but why do you think there's so much of that in our culture right now?
Yeah, I was learning all those hard lessons at the same time, right? Even with the financial piece. I think that inherently human beings want to know that they're valued and that they are lovable. And I think that we don't know that we're seeking that. We don't know that valid, like we're just all seeking that validation. And I think we all go down different paths and we try to find that in many different ways. And I think that's just part of being human. I don't know that we really ever get out of that.
Yeah.
But I think that bringing light to it and saying, if your goal is to have serenity and peace and validation and worthiness, I think what I have to say is you don't actually need the weight loss or the body image to do that. And I can prove that because I can show you lots of people in larger bodies who are radiating confidence and value. So they're not they're not interdependent of one another.
Right.
And I think that we're inundated with messages that essentially help businesses thrive.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were thriving. We were doing very well, but not really from an emotional standpoint. And that was the trickiest part, was that in order for me to go to this like deeper calling, to like adhere to this whisper that was coming from the inside, I actually had to detach from my identity of that. I had to detach from this idea that I was this successful entrepreneur, that I was eating the right way, that I had the best exercise. I had to detach from all of it.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is I live a very different life today. And people who meet me now, or not meet me, but who I interact with now that maybe I haven't for a few years, I feel like they're like meeting a new version of me.
Mhm.
And that's often scary. But I will tell you that how I feel today is a lot more peace and serenity. And I don't have any of those things anymore. So it's just, I think it's just an illusion,
Yeah.
essentially,
Absolutely.
that we need something outside of us in order to feel okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think that's our journey in life to figure that out, that that's not the case, right? And some people figure it out sooner than others, but that's the goal. At the end of the day, it's all within us, and we just have to look. Sometimes it takes longer, but it's all there. And I appreciate everything you're sharing. So just to understand further, what was that process of detachment like? Because for me, it's an ongoing thing. To your point too, like we tend to find attachment to other things, and that process is ongoing in the sense that I always have to be reminding myself. And sometimes you start feeling like this is hard work, or why am I even doing this? Like to your point, you were successful and that could be easy, right? Like it's easy lifestyle, right? You're bringing in good money. So why change any of that? And I wonder, how is that like narrative for you? I know for me, it's reminding myself that no, this is where I want to be. This is my purpose, this calling. And yes, as much as at times when things do get difficult, that's part of it. I've signed up for this. And if I didn't have these challenges, then I wouldn't be finding that meaning. So that's just how I've been able to work through it. But just curious to hear your journey with it.
I mean, it's once I had all of those things, I was like, this is it. And I just had this like inner knowing that this was not it. And it just, like, as time went on, I couldn't really ignore it anymore. And I use this analogy of that I think that like human beings are born with two dials, like their internal knowing and the external, and like this external dial that is like society and culture and family. And I think that if a baby were in this podcast with us, their internal dial were born to level 10 and they wouldn't care that we're like having a podcast. They would just scream that they were hungry or needed something. And I think as we age and get older and grow up, we turn the internal dial down and the external dial up. And I don't believe that the internal dial could ever be turned off, and nor do I believe the external dial can either. But
Mhm.
I think it's about figuring out a way to turn the internal dial up a little bit, just a little bit louder than the external, so that you can lead from within and not lead from without, like from the outside.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that is what was happening. It was like I just couldn't ignore that internal dial. And I just was like, this is going to be hard either way, because if I ignore it, I feel like self abandonment and pick your hard. And I already had gone down that path. And what was the next? I'll never forget my co-founder. He one time was like, before we had started business, was like, I just really, once I make $10 million a year, then I will have. And the minute he told me that, I said, no, it will not be $10 million. It will be $100 million. And so it's that constant seeking of something outside of us, because once we get there, we realize, oh, it didn't bring me the fulfillment I thought it was. Maybe if I go more. It's the same thing with weight loss. It's the same thing with once I get the perfect partner, right? It's once I get something outside of me, then I will feel me. Then I will feel whole. And my personal experience is that hasn't been the case. And I've gone down that path of the body and the health and the money, and that it just, those weren't the things that worked for me. And I'm always open to other people's stories around
Right.
that. They just weren't the things that meant something to me. And I think that inner knowing and that inner calling just got too loud. And it was like, okay, you're going to self abandon or and conform to society, or are you going to investigate this further? And so I also recognize I'm probably forming another identity now that I might have to detach from. And so I think the difference is, I think before I felt like I had figured it out. And now that is the difference. And now I
Yeah.
feel like I'm like
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
aware of that. Like, you're never going to figure it out. And just right? Think so that has been the bigger shift. So maybe the next identity shift, it will be a little smoother, because
I
I
agree,
sit
and
in
I
a
think the
lot more
biggest piece,
curiosity.
what I'm drawing from you, and I've experienced this too, is it's that first time where we have that identity crisis where it's like everything's just earth shattering. And then once you go through it, you become more flexible. And to your point, you're more open and curious to, okay, what's this season of my life telling me now? Where do I need to go with this now? How do I pivot from this point? But once you've gotten used to it, it becomes a lot easier and you're more open and receptive to it. And I think that alone is part of growth. But I found myself too, it was the first time where I was like, just, oh, this is too much at once. I don't know. if I'm ready for this or not. And there's a lot of doubt, a lot of questioning around what the changes I was making. But now it's okay. This is something new, and I need to work through this and become more open to it and see what's coming up for me and what is the universe trying to tell me and guide me in which direction. So I agree with you on all of that. But coming back to the business now, I do want to understand what's different now. I know you talked about more movement based. Now, for clients or individuals that are taking part in that, what's different for them as well in terms of fulfillment?
Yeah. We're working with the new
Mhm.
company. We're really adhering to a 4-pillar approach. And the idea is that when we address these 4 pillars, we can change our relationship to self and how we are with our own. And the 4 pillars are movement, beliefs, community, and intention. So when we talk about movement, we're talking about like, how do I move my body in a way that is sustainable for the long haul? How do I address pain or injuries or potential injuries? It's this idea, and I hate to use CrossFit because I actually have respect for CrossFit and used to do it myself, but it's this mentality of I'm going to come in here and I'm
Yeah,
going to get a PR and I'm going to do this thing. And it's okay, that's
right.
great. But what is your body asking you for? And I have a good friend who owns a physical therapy clinic and he loves CrossFit because in all of those types
Yeah.
of programs, because they keep me in business. So we always laugh a little bit about that. But we're focusing more on movement. So we take our customers through micro movement progressions based on their exact body. So like my squat may look very different than yours. Your press may look very different than mine. Like
Mhm.
all of these things, like we have the bodies are very complex and unique. So our customers come in, they take an assessment and let us know what their body is capable of.
Mhm.
And then our programming allows them like a wide spectrum of scalability. So we can accommodate someone who's post physical therapy or even in bed all the way to a professional level athlete. And it's just like we're all doing the same workout that day, but not really because we're all doing va- totally different variations of those movements. So we're really focusing on that. We could have you use our product
Right.
today and it would still benefit you and serve you when you're 75. So it's the scalability and the customization and the personalization that I think is different. Also, again, we're adhering to what we are considering like a quality standard, right? It's not about PRs, it's not about ballistic movements, it's about tuning in and figuring out what your body needs. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
being a human being means that at some point in our life, we will be in physical pain. And oftentimes, it can be from the crazy workout, but it can also be, oh my gosh, I just went to pick something off the ground. And a lot of that is a result
Right.
of we all are born into this world and we all have micro movement dysfunctions. That's just part of being human. And so we're really trying to address that and trying to figure out what your body
Yeah.
needs and providing a move that that is good for you. Now, some people come in and say, oh, well, that means I'm not going to get a good workout. And I'm like, okay, you will, but yes, just push play because I've watched the upper levels of movements that we do here. We're really focusing on strength, flexibility, balance, and coordination. And then once you have mastered that movement, we progress you to the next level and then we
Mhm.
increase load. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with the movement part and a lot of
Yeah.
planning and really curated programming.
Okay.
And then, but the user experience is take the quiz and then push play and then adjust
Right.
in real
Right.
time as needed. So it's just a big shift, right? From how we think about exercise. It's not as sexy. I'm sorry. I wish it could be, but we're just getting people to move better in their body and getting their bodies to feel good for the long haul. And then the intention piece is like, why am I doing that? That to me is why so many people don't stick with something in terms of moving their body because when we act from a place of receiving external validation,
Mhm.
it's not the same as feeling this intrinsic desire. And I've been in the fitness industry now for over 20 years, and I really just started enjoying movement about 2 or 3 years ago. It was like, yeah, I was doing all of the exercise plans, but was I enjoying it? Probably not. It was like I hate the word motivation too. I was like, I was having to motivate myself. But now I move because I want to move. But my intention behind why I'm doing it is drastically different. It's to connect with a friend on a hike. It's because I need to like get some
Mhm.
mobility in my it's because it's the intention is completely different. And so there's an energetic ease that comes
Absolutely.
with
I
it
think,
because I'm not
yeah,
having
because
to
I
try
think
as hard.
you
I don't
could
know if
go to
that
the
makes
gym and lift weights, but you're not really enjoying it, and that kind of loses the whole purpose, right? And what you're sharing is there's that, again, like you touched on, the intentionality behind the movement. Why are you doing it? And I think a lot of exercise, whether it's hiking or, like, for me, I started Brazilian jiu-jitsu a few months ago, and it's the same thing. Why am I doing it? What just For me, it's the intentionality is like, it's more mental than just the ability to do uh, jujitsu. Like, it's the mental challenge for me that I enjoy. And then, as you touched on, there's that sense of community too, where you go to the gym and everyone's looking out for each other and teaching everyone. Both of those things tie in as well. So I definitely appreciate that. You touched on PRs. Just for the listeners, do you mind expanding on that and why it's something that you guys don't focus on?
Yeah, we don't do a lot of like tracking and gamification in our product intentionally because
Mhm.
I still think it's reaching to that place of external validation. I, I've gone back and forth with our team about this. No one has really been able to come to a conclusion around should we track this or should we track that. I'm like, let's not until we have a good reason to, because I think that I want this to be about people connecting with themselves. And when we're working in a place of PRs, we're actually, are we really just doing that for ourselves? If we are,
Mhm.
then I don't know. I haven't been able to feel fully settled on that. It's usually so we can tell someone that we did the PR. I'm more like my favorite question when people come in is how many days a week
Yeah.
should I work? And I'm like, how on earth would I be able to determine that for you? What if you had a bad night's sleep? What if you got, I don't know. So usually the first exercise,
Yeah.
no pun intended, that I have people doing is check in with your body. What do you need? Some days I need a WeShape workout where I'm doing a lot of mobility and movement and micro movement, where I'm doing that kind of like more structured work. And some days I need a hike in the woods. Some days I need to go play tennis. Some days I need to go surfing. Some days I need to ride my bike. It's different every day. And I just want people to get used to that. Like, we're so conditioned to look with outside of ourselves to get that thing. And I want to be clear because obviously we need times outside of ourselves where we're getting help, right? Like, we're a medical condition, or I'm not saying like we should just throw the baby out with the water, but I'm saying in terms of this is a good practice to say, what does my body need today? And I've done this with my food, and I've done this with my relationship to movement and exercise, and
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
radically
I think
different that I'm
I
not
I agree
following
with
such a
you. There is
prescriptive
that point
plan.
of listening to your body because you may need different things at different times, and your goals may change too over time, right? I know for me, the goals have changed, and in fact, I'll change my goals throughout the year when it comes to movement, depending on what I'm feeling or where I'm at or the season. Here in Canada, we go through different seasons, so that changes as well. And then the other piece, yeah, I think it's understanding why you're doing it. So again, it comes back to that intentionality like you touched on.
And I'm sure there are and no diss to PRs. Like, I'm sure some people just do it and they love it and it's fun and maybe they create community around it. I'm actually like a big fan of uh, body autonomy and doing what feels good for you. I just haven't included that sort of gamification or tracking so much
Mhm.
inside the product because I don't want it to be a rabbit hole for people to compare themselves to other people. I don't want leaderboards. This is about an experience with you. If you want to jot down your own WeShape PRs on the side, fine, that's great. But I'm really trying to get people to connect. So I think it can be a slippery slope, but only yourself. And if you're doing it because you enjoy that, then I never want to discourage somebody from it. But I just haven't been able to feel settled on including that in our product because I don't
Right.
want people to go down the rabbit hole if,
Yeah, yeah, I think
unbeknownst
the
to their
one
own
thing I
intention, right? I'm trying to get
do
people
think
clear
it
on their
could be
intention.
beneficial, I know it's been for me, is just from a motivating standpoint, pushing myself a little bit, right? If I see the leaderboard, I'm like, okay, I'm going to push myself here. It does, I end up actually doing better than I thought I would, right? Just knowing that, okay, maybe I can catch up to this person or whatever. So I don't know if that's worth anything, but perhaps it loses the whole intention behind it. If you're starting the exercise with just for your own body and then you start competing with someone else, then yeah, maybe that intention is lost.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I started noticing about our product, I was on a couple podcasts with eating disorder therapists, and after our interview, they would say, "Oh my goodness, are you offering this product to the eating disorder community?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't think of." And they would say, "I haven't seen other products out there that wouldn't be triggering for somebody because you're not gamifying it, you're not tracking it, you're just focusing on movement and connecting with your body." And so now that I know some people from that community are potentially using our product, I'm trying to be very mindful of what we're doing and how we're doing it, just
Yeah.
so that
Yeah. No,
everyone
that's
can
fair.
feel like they
That's
have a
fair.
safe
And then you
space to
touched on the
work out.
community piece. I just want, again, expand on that. Why do you think that's important? CrossFit is huge on community too. And you see a lot of people build relationships and friendships in that community, but why was that also one of your pillars?
Yeah, I love that about CrossFit. They do have strong communities. It's a huge pillar because for a couple reasons. One, what we're doing is counter to what the culture says. So counter in terms of how we're prescribing exercise or really not prescribing it rather, and counter to how we're trying to get people to connect with their body and shift their mentality. So if you are doing something that feels really good for you, but the rest of the world isn't doing that, you're going to need to find your people so that you
Hmm.
can feel supported in that. Otherwise, you're just going to feel completely discouraged all the time. The second reason is I was really
Hmm.
inspired by
Yeah, I've
Dr.
heard
Wendy
her on the
Suzuki, the
Huberman Lab. Yeah.
neuroscientist who had been done some, are you familiar with her? She had, yeah, she had done some research on longevity and what the key pillars to that were, and she thought for sure it was gonna be exercise as the number 1, and she discovered it was actually a sense of community, and she further explained that by helping us understand it didn't have to be with a best friend, it could be with the everyday friendly conversation that you have with the
Yeah.
barista when you go get your coffee, and I was like, "That is some powerful ass research to say that interaction on a daily basis is contributing more to someone's quality and quantity of life than even
Hmm.
exercise, not to de-emphasize the importance of movement, but to highlight the importance of communities. Based off of those two things alone, I just knew we had to have community. So we actually have in our product, we have daily community calls. We have various topics so people can log in, they can do a workout, or they can actually join a call. And we have all kinds of topics. So we have like a physical therapist, Dr. Lisa Folden, who leads a lot of our calls. Our co-founder, Coach Tyler, leads calls all on like movement-based stuff, like aches, injuries, pain, movement-related questions. We have Coach Kaysen, who is one of our head moderator coaches who leads like a lot of discussion, topical based, like how to have more body acceptance or how to create community. And then we have guest experts that are outside of the WeShape ecosystem that come in and host various calls. So clinical psychologists or therapists, they come in and host calls around body acceptance or intuitive eating or how to create a deeper, more meaningful relationship with self or how to unsubscribe from toxic diet culture. So we have all kinds of calls that
Yeah,
people can
that's very
join, and
cool
that
and
also
unique because
furthers
I
that
haven't
sense of
heard
like
of
we're in
anyone
this
else
together.
offering that in. Would you classify yourself in the fitness industry or how would you classify them? Yeah.
We're leading our product is a technology driven fitness product, but we are very much tackling the mentality side. And in the app, you have access to, we even have a community forum that you can
Mm.
post. We have access to all the
Yeah.
calls.
It
Yeah,
is
it's kind
very
of hitting
unique
both,
and there's
right?
obviously the
It's
education in it too as
yeah.
well. And as when you were talking about the community piece and the research around even the barista, I do see it. And as you were mentioning that, I can relate because there's some guys I I don't know them outside of the gym, nor am I friends with them, but I run into them because we're have similar times when we go, and we'll strike up a conversation, and it's good just talking to them and catching up and learning from them. And sometimes we'll give each other pointers, or we'll just talk about something completely random, and it'll give me something to I'll learn something walking away from it. So there is that sense of community there too, that I've built some sort of friendship with these guys that we have something in common with. So does add to the whole component of exercise. Whereas sometimes too, I just need to go in quickly and get a workout in. So I'll just have my headphones in and just get to work. But it does help from that perspective too, having that sense of community.
Absolutely. And we have found, especially when people are talking about really vulnerable things like learning how to accept their body, that is, we have been taught everything that's counter to it, right? Everything that we buy or do is change your body. And so it's really nice to have a group of people that are just vulnerable and yeah, I want to lean into more self acceptance. I want to figure out how I can develop a new connection with self and to have people around me that are supporting that is really, I think, provides a lot of tremendous value. So, yeah, the community piece is huge here. And we also run these 30-day, we do these challenges, but we call them feel good challenges. And we're really just focusing on those 4 pillars, one a week. And it's really with the intention of people coming in and having an opportunity to feel better, not necessarily to change anything about their body. So we focus on those 4 pillars. And it's been really interesting to see. One time I had this incredible woman in her 70s join the feel good challenge. And so
Yeah.
many people come in and they join us for a workout. And then we're like, "Yes, we're actually doing this other work in addition to," but she came in and she said, I joined this challenge. I want to do the workouts. And honestly, at the end of the challenge, I look in the mirror now and there's a different voice in my head. And I realize that the voice I used to hear when I looked in the mirror was not mine. It was my mother and my sister always telling me that I needed to lose weight and that I needed to change something about myself. And this challenge has given me an opportunity to have
Sure.
my voice turned up. And I no longer think those things about
Sure.
myself anymore. And how liberating. I will take that over weight loss any day. So it's just a powerful testament to the relationship that we
Mhm.
have with ourselves. And going back to that analogy I had around internal versus external dial, if people can come to WeShape and I can just turn the internal
Mhm.
dial up by one
Absolutely.
little
I
notch,
agree with
like we
that.
will have
And then the
done a good job
last piece
here.
I just wanted to expand on, as you'd mentioned, amongst the 4 pillars, the belief piece. I know you mentioned it, but we didn't really get into it. It probably ties in nicely with everything you've shared already, including your own journey with it. But how does belief fit into all of this?
Yeah. One of the things when we were outlining how we wanted to address like some of these issues in the fitness industry, we were like, how are we going to address this mentality side? This is a big mountain to climb. One of the ways that we've started to address this is we have what we call the Feeling Lighter podcast by WeShape. So it's a play on, we're not actually here to lose weight, but feeling lighter is just like what we're really after. And so we always say in that podcast, like we're shedding old beliefs one episode at a time because ultimately how you feel about yourself changes everything. Like the way that I
Right.
think about self and that voice inside my own mind dictates every behavior in my. So beliefs are really all of it. And so we bring various guests on to each week to essentially say, we used to maybe think this, and maybe we're going to be curious and you're going to highlight something different. So for example, one of my favorite guests we've had on was Patrilli, and she was talking about that our culture highlights that health equals diet and exercise. And the reality is that there's actually, I can't get quoted on
Mhm.
the stats here, but there was actually like 13 to 15 different health behaviors, and diet and exercise were only two. And categorically, how they actually impacted our health over the long haul was like significantly less than we had thought. Not to devalue them, but to highlight that we only focus on those things. And then we do something like we see someone in a certain body and call them healthy, and we see someone in a different body and we call them not healthy.
Right.
And those are actually really scientifically inaccurate ways to be looking at our overall longevity of our health. And so that episode alone was like, oh, I had that belief my health was diet and exercise. And now I can step back and be curious and go, is it? And if I'm actually able to shift that belief, then my attention and behaviors go to different areas. So now I understand that checking in with my doctor on a regular basis, addressing my mental health with the like all of these things, the community that I have, my sleep, there's so many different things. She also did an incredible job of highlighting, like, if you're really fixated on your diet and exercise, that's okay, but what a privilege to be in that position, right? Because there are many people, even in the US alone, who have much bigger issues. She gave some stats around even clean drinking water that were really disheartening. So it's like our focus is so narrow. But anyway, I say all of this to say the point of that is that we have a lot of beliefs that maybe we don't even know don't serve us. And if we can evaluate some of those and get curious, they may shift us a little. So every week we
Yeah,
have a new
yeah, and
guest
I
on and we're
agree
sort
with
of
you on that too. I
evaluating
think that the
various beliefs
physical
that drive
piece
our
is just
behaviors.
what's visible, and you don't know what's going on underneath the hood. Like for me, there was a time where, yeah, physically everything looked great, but mentally things were not working out at times and spiritually as well. So now that I've been able to prioritize all three for myself, I feel even better physically. I have way more energy, and it's not like I'm doing anything different. It's just I've been able to focus on some of those beliefs and some of the things that were happening underneath below the surface. And I do agree, yeah, that belief part is huge, because if we look great and we still have that negative belief or view of ourselves, then are we really being healthy? And that is something we all need to ask ourselves, right? And especially in the digital world, there's so much focus on those visible metrics. Don't spend a lot of time talking about some of the other things that truly matter.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
we talk a lot about this on the podcast, but we do live in a very fat phobic culture. And so a lot of our beliefs stem from there, like about health, about and our value, about so many things. And I'm like, that was a constructed belief.
Yeah,
Like I always get fascinated by human beings because I'm like, we made up that rule. I it's made up. And yeah, I love having various guests come on and just highlight different things. And a lot of the guests actually make like selfishly, I'm like, oh, I want to test this belief I have. Let's have this person come on. Yeah, I think that
absolutely.
staying
Absolutely.
curious
Katie,
always a
thank you
really
so
important
much
part of
for
this
coming on
process.
here. Is there anything else you feel like we haven't covered, but it would be of value to the listeners and you would like to share?
I mean, I think just searching within and being okay if that voice is telling you to go a path that isn't maybe normal to the quote unquote normal culture. I think staying true to yourself and seeking within is for me anyway, the path that has been the most fulfilling. So I'd love to also offer your listeners a free trial to WeShape if they want to come check us out and say hi. They
Okay.
can go to WeShape.com/EZ and they can get a 2-week free trial and check out our workouts, join some of our community calls. And they're also welcome to check out the
Awesome.
Feeling
Yeah, I
Lighter
was going to ask you
podcast
if you
if they
wanted to
want to
share
hear about
anything
some of
else you
those
would like
guests
to
I was
share in
talking
terms
about.
of how people can get a hold of you.
Yes. We're on all social platforms. We have 2 social accounts. One is focusing on movement and one is focusing on mentality. So at WeShape is the movement side of it, and at Feeling
Awesome.
Lighter
I will put
podcast is
all of
the
that in the
mentality
show notes,
side. So you
but
can find on all
thank you
social
again for
platforms
your
too.
time and coming on here and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.